Madam President, today, as I have done every day that we've been in session since we returned from our August break, I've been talking about the impact of the Ryan budget, which is now the Romney-Ryan budget, on America and what it would mean for our future. So I take the floor today, as I have in the past, to talk about one aspect of it. In the past, I've talked about the impact on health care, on education, on the social safety net. Today I'd like to talk about what the Romney-Ryan budget does to our infrastructure, to job training, to avenues to the middle class for people. The real question that the American people face this coming election is, are we going to restore and rebuild the middle class? Or are we going to continue to shift even more and more of our wealth to just a few at the top at the expense of the middle class? Now, my Republican friends have made clear where they stand on this. They did so when nearly every Republican in Congress voted in favor of the Ryan budget plan, which Governor Romney embraced as marvelous. Well, the very centerpiece of the Ryan budget is the dramatic shift of even more wealth to those at the top. Huge new tax cuts for the richest 2%. Those making more than $1 million a year would get an extra $394,000 a year in tax breaks under the Ryan budget. Now, that's on top of the $265,000 that they already have. So that brings it up to well over $400,000, almost $500,000 a year that they would get. Now, we keep hearing a lot of talk about entitlements for the poor. You know, every hear Governor Romney talk about entitlements. He always focuses on the poor. How about this? This is an entitlement. If you make over $1 million, you're entitled to it. Well, you won't hear him talking about that entitlement. So how do the Republicans and the Ryan budget, how do they pay for these huge new tax cuts that total $4.5 trillion over 10 years? Well, the Romney-Ryan budget would partially offset the tax cuts by making deep, draconian cuts to programs that undergird the middle class and are essential to the quality of life in this country. As I said, everything from education, student grants and loans, to highways, bridges, other infrastructure projects. Lastly, the Romney-Ryan budget offsets big new tax cuts for those at the top by actually raising taxes on the middle class. Yes, you heard me. That is exactly right. The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center estimates that under the Ryan plan, middle-class families with children would see their taxes go up, on average, by more than $2,000. The bottom line is that the Ryan budget does not reduce the deficit. The savings they gain by slashing spending, raising taxes on the middle class, basically go to offsetting the $4.5 trillion in new tax cuts, which I just pointed out go to the wealthiest Americans. I think this shows you right here about what's happening to the deficit. We always hear talks about balancing the budget. Well, the truth is Representative Ryan and Mr. Romney are not interested in balancing the budget. Their plan would not balance the budget until 2040, 28 years from now. 28 years from now. As I said earlier, that Mr. Ryan is a true acolyte of former Vice President Cheney, who in an unguarded moment said that deficits don't matter. That was Vice President Cheney. Well, if you look at the debt piled up under the Bush years, you'll see that they didn't think deficits matter. And look at this. Here's the debt held by the public under the Ryan budget going from 2013 just to 2022 in the next 10 years. Look at the debt. The debt goes up. It doesn't go down. And where does this debt go? Tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. That's where it goes. Representative Ryan doubles down on the theory that if we give an even greater share of wealth to those at the top, it will magically trickle down. A theory that was tried under President George W. Bush. But in the years after those Bush tax cuts, we know what happened to the jobs in America. They plummeted. They plummeted in the years after George Bush and those tax cuts went into effect. Now, today I just want to focus specifically on the impact of the Romney-Ryan budget on our nation's infrastructure and job training. Both, I believe, are crucial for the creation of middle-class jobs in a competitive global economy. Regrettably, the Ryan budget would be a devastating 1-2 punch to our nation's economy. It would drastically slash investment in infrastructure. That would destroy hundreds of thousands of well-paying jobs. It would radically reduce funding for job training, reducing opportunities for the unemployed to get retooled for jobs in sectors of the economy where they're needed. Madam President, the United States now competes in a global marketplace. To improve our competitiveness and to give our workers the education and skills they need to compete, both our public and private sectors must make robust investments in infrastructure, education, job training. Overcrowded and crumbling roads, outdated waterways, other means of transportation and transport have a profoundly damaging effect on our economy. This increases the time and expense of moving goods. It hurts our global competitiveness, as I said, especially at a time when our rivals in the global marketplace are investing heavily in both infrastructure and job training. Even maintaining our current levels of infrastructure investment will have negative consequences for our economy. That's if we just maintain what we have. The American Society of Civil Engineers predicts that if current trends continue by 2020, our deteriorating infrastructure will result in 900,000 fewer jobs and $900 billion in lost economic growth. This was the American Society of Civil Engineers in 2011, said that the deficiencies in America's roads, bridges, and transit systems cost households and businesses roughly $130 billion, including approximately $97 billion in vehicle operating costs. You can read that to mean potholes and things that bang your car up. $32 billion in delays in travel time, if you've been stuck in a lot of traffic. $1.2 billion in safety costs, and $590 million in environmental costs. That's the Society of Civil Engineers. You know, that's not an arm of the Democratic Party or any party. This is really a very nonpartisan economic look at what's happening in our infrastructure. So by slashing these investments to even lower levels, the Ryan budget will only make these problems worse, not better. In fact, the Ryan budget cuts transportation spending by 1/3 in the first year. I mean, we're not talking about a little nip and a tuck on infrastructure. Here is the fiscal year 2012 enacted transportation budget, $89 billion. The Ryan-Romney budget for next year, $57 billion. Almost a 1/3 cut. Think what that would mean to the jobs in America. Think what it means to our crumbling infrastructure. Then you have to compare how much we're investing in our infrastructure to what one of our biggest competitors, China, is doing. So here's China. As a percent of their gross domestic product, GDP, they're spending 9% on infrastructure of their GDP. Here's the United States in 1960. When I was a college student working summer jobs, laying pavement and building bridges on the interstate highway system, we were spending 4% of our GDP on infrastructure. We're now down to 2.4%. And the Romney-Ryan budget would take that even lower. So already, our federal investments in infrastructure are inadequate. For example, we have failed to bring the half-century-old interstate highway system into the 21st century. Again, the Romney-Ryan budget would make that even worse. The Ryan budget would make deep cuts to funding for the Corps of Engineers, which is already grossly underfunded and struggling to maintain a deteriorating waterway system, so crucial for the movement of bulk goods, and I might add also crucial for flood control. Madam President, the Ryan budget also would take a meat axe to federal funding for job training and education, America's pathway to the middle class. It would jeopardize vital job services for millions of Americans. 31 million Americans got federal help with their job searches last year. Help to write their resumes, prepare for interviews, information about the best jobs available in their local area, referrals to job openings. Several 100,000 were also able to participate in job training under federal programs. This gave these American workers the opportunity to compete for good jobs so they have a shot at the middle class. It created a steady supply of skilled workers for U.S. businesses, made their production, their operations more productive, and it helped them to grow. Think about that. Several 100,000 people out of work were able to participate in job training because of federal programs. You know, that's part of Mr. Romney's 47% that he says he doesn't care about, that are the takers in our society. No, Mr. Romney, they're not takers. These are people struggling to make a better life for themselves and their families. They want job training. They want better education. They want to upgrade their skills. They want to work. The Romney-Ryan budget would pull the rug out from underneath them and say, tough luck, you're on your own. Well, I don't think they should be there on their own. They should be part of our American family. Without sustained, robust investments in quality infrastructure and well-trained workers, America will fall behind, job creation will suffer. This is a critical threat to the future of the middle class in our country. So, Madam President, in essence, the Ryan budget essentially rejects the very possibility that the federal government can act to spur economic growth, boost competitiveness, and create good middle-class jobs. But this flies in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. At critical junctures, going back to the beginning of our republic, the federal government has stepped up to the plate, acting decisively to spur economic growth, foster innovation, and help create jobs. 1791, Alexander Hamilton presented to Congress his landmark Report on Manufactures, a set of federal policies designed to strengthen the new republic's economy by creating a network of roads and canals. The most visionary 19th century advocate of federal investments to spur economic growth was the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. In 1862, he signed the Pacific Railway Act, authorizing federal land grants to finance construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, one of the great technological feats, by the way, of the 19th century. But Lincoln did much more. He created the Department of Agriculture to modernize U.S. agriculture and distribute land to farmers. And as a proud graduate of Iowa State University, I also note that Lincoln dramatically expanded access to higher education across the United States by signing into law land-grant college system. Now, taken together, these initiatives had a transformative impact on the U.S. economy. You know, it's humorous to imagine how today's Republicans would have reacted to Lincoln's agenda. What if Abraham Lincoln were to present this today to the Tea Party? He wouldn't get anywhere. Later, 1950s, there was another Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower, who championed one of the greatest public works projects in American history, construction of our national interstate highway system. A 1996 study concluded that the interstate highway system is an engine that has driven 40 years of unprecedented prosperity in America. In recent times, the federal government has funded and spearheaded scientific discovery and innovation. The Department of Defense really invented the internet. It was federal research that led to the invention of the global positioning satellite system. Mr. President, any discussion of the federal government's historic role in discovery and innovation and job creation must acknowledge the staggering achievements of the National Institutes of Health. More than 80 Nobel Prizes have been awarded for NIH-supported research. So it's absurd to claim that the federal government cannot play a positive and even profound role in boosting the economy and spurring innovation. But the Romney-Ryan budget demands that we permanently hobble the federal government. That's the Romney-Ryan budget. This negative, defeatist viewpoint is dead wrong, and the disinvestment that it advocates will set our country into a death spiral of stagnation and decline. Going back to the 1930s, the American people have supported and strengthened a kind of a unique American social contract. The social contract says that a cardinal role of government is to provide a ladder of opportunity so that every American can realistically aspire to the American dream. The Ryan budget would rip up that social contract. Don't take my word for it. Former Ronald Reagan economist, economic advisor, Bruce Bartlett, on the Ryan budget said this, quote, distributionally, the Ryan plan is a monstrosity. The rich would receive huge tax cuts, while the social safety net would be shredded to pay for them. Shredded to pay for them. Well, Mr. President, the Ryan budget rips up the social safety net, disinvests in our infrastructure, cuts funding for job training, cuts money for education, cuts money for health care. As I said, it is a negative, defeatist viewpoint that will set our country into a death spiral of stagnation and decline. The Romney-Ryan budget would replace that unique American social contract that we have with a survival of the fittest, winner-take-all philosophy that tells struggling, aspiring Americans and their communities, tough luck, you're on your own. Mr. President, I agree with former President Bill Clinton. We have two philosophies here. The Romney-Ryan budget, tough luck, you're on your own, or the other philosophy, that we're all Americans and we're all in this together. We're all mutually supportive. We believe in a ladder or ramp of opportunity. And yes, we believe the federal government has a powerful role to play in making sure that all Americans can aspire to the American dream, they can reach the middle class, can achieve to the highest of their potentialities and their abilities. That's the difference. I think the American people need to know what's in that Ryan budget. And you might say, well, a budget's a budget. A budget's a blueprint. Just as you build a building, you have to have a blueprint. Well, a budget is a blueprint for the future of where you want to go. Communities have budgets, families have budgets, schools have budgets. You have a budget so you can plan. It's where you want to be in the future. The Ryan budget is a blueprint for defeat and a death spiral into stagnation for America. And I believe the more that the American people understand and know what's in that Ryan budget, they're going to turn it aside and say, no, we can do better than that in America. We need a budget that reflects our hopes and aspirations and our ability as Americans to work together to achieve the American dream for all.